The following is a presentation of the Sovereign Tech Double Secret Exclusive Feed.
The Golden Stain, the Man of Tomorrow, Sabzu, the Rated R radio star, Dr. Brian Sovereign, here for your Wednesday Q&A. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you on this. This is going to be a single topic episode. We are going to cover only the Israel-Hamas War. And this will be my third time recording this, because it's something that has gotten me. This is something that has hit me very hard. Not in the way that I think you would expect, but it has been a challenge to record this. Even me, a podcast professional as I often boast, have had an incredibly hard time pulling this one together. So, to avoid getting into too much of an emotional tirade, perhaps, I'm going to keep this one, try and keep it tight, to the point, to the facts. Well, the facts are part of the problem, aren't they? And we'll talk about that. But there's a very good chance that this episode is going to appear in the public. And I don't mean that it's going to appear in the Sovereign Technica feed. I mean it could appear elsewhere. And if that ends up being the case, I want to make sure that people know who I am, why I feel that I can talk about this, why I feel that I have something to share. Unlike a lot of people out there who frankly have no business talking about any of this, in my opinion. It's not even a matter of credentials or authority, but they don't have those either. But my point is, if I repeat some things that you longtime listeners know very well about me, know that I am doing it for that purpose, and it's not to bore you. Okay? So, let's get right into this. What we are talking about is the conflict, the war between Israel and the elected group in Gaza by the Palestinians, that being Hamas. That started on Shabbat of October 7th, 2023. A conflict that the last numbers I saw, and again, facts are part of the problem here, we're going to talk about that, has claimed at least 12,000 lives. Both sides. If you're wondering why I haven't talked about this until now, because I assure you, I have gotten the messages, I've gotten the emails, I have been reached out to talk about this. Ever since it started. We're in, I think, week 6 now. This would be week 6 of this war. Why I haven't talked about it? Well, for one, I think you should wait until the bodies are at least cold. At least the initial ones. Before you open your mouth. I think you should have some information that you can at least somewhat verify. Especially when you're thousands of miles away. When events like this occur, it's a time to listen. Now, to be fair, some celebrities, individuals of influence, have thankfully had the wherewithal to say, hey, I know I don't understand everything that's going on over in Israel right now. But I just want to, empathize with anyone who's lost with anybody that's lost anyone and all this. Now that's a proper response, to recognize that you don't understand what's happening, and to just express empathy and perhaps do what you can. But not a lot of people have taken that tack. There's some, but not many. Social media has only made all of this so much worse. I do think a lot of people, especially people who, because this is being considered in some ways a race war, right? The claim, keyword, the claim that Hamas wants all Jews dead. Okay, so that makes it a race war. The claim that this is a race war has gotten a lot of people reacting and quickly taking sides, when I think normally that perhaps would not so much be the case. This has, in my opinion, caused a lot of my fellow Jews to make a lot of idiotic, harmful, dare I say even lethal statements, would end up in lethality, about this war. And let me be clear here, being Jewish is not enough of a reason for you to open your mouth about this. Especially if you're somebody of some degree of influence. I say this all the time. When I get behind this mic, it's not a joke for me. It's not a side gig. I know that there are people, who look to me for guidance on certain things, especially, this was primarily a tech show for so many years. And a lot of it had to do with cryptography and everything else. There was people who, frankly, their lives, or perhaps even businesses that would not be recognized as legitimate, even though they were by certain authorities around the world, were reliant upon my recommendations. I had to take things that seriously, and I still do. And it's just as true when it comes to these kinds of matters that are not just a matter of geopolitics, nor are they just a matter of race or anything along those lines. Let me tell you, just so you know where I'm coming from and why I feel like I have some standing in all of this. I am someone who lost family members. First off, yes, I'm ethnically Jewish. I am also a practicing Jew. I am a Kabbalist. I wear the menorah around my neck every day. I lost family members during the events of September 11th at the World Trade Center. That led me to joining the U.S. Army. I ended up on the front lines of two wars, Iraqi freedom and Afghanistan. I have been shot, stabbed, beaten up, go down the list of it, during those wars. And coming out of those wars, became a stringent pacifist. Now, pacifism has a lot of different definitions, but I just want you to know that I'm not some pacifist because I'm some weakling or because I've never been in an actual conflict. No. I've killed far too many people. And as far as being some kind of weakling, 6'1", 235 pounds, spend far too much time also in the gym. While I am not a proponent of lethal force or physical force for that matter, I think the last term that anybody would use for me is weak. I'm also a complete dork. Complete in every way. My knowledge of Star Trek is perhaps only bested by my knowledge of Torah and Talmud. That's where the doctor in the name comes from. I say none of this to boast. I say it as a matter of standing. So that you know that if this racial aspect of this war was something that mattered, it directly applied to me as an Ashkenazi Jew. And that's on both sides. No halvesies here. And that I have been to the Middle East, spent years in the Middle East, saw the ugliest of ugly all over the place, though admittedly, primarily from the own military that I was a part of. And as far as any of these fucking arguments that, oh, well, this is all prophesied in the book of Revelation. By the way, I know I said Torah and Talmud earlier, I assure you. So my parents converted to Christianity when I was a teenager. I assure you, that same zest for sacred texts applied as much to the New Testament as it did to anything I learned at Sabbath school. And of course, learned far beyond that. I'm not a Christian now, by no means. But just in case you think I don't understand the New Testament, if you're a longtime listener, you'd know the exact opposite. So, I can speak to a lot of this. Okay. I am not going to get into, I also happen to be somebody who's worked in the tech sector most of my life. So as far as understanding technology and the concerns around misinformation and all that shit and everything going on with social media, I've been a tech journalist for over a decade. I can speak to all of that. Before being a tech journalist, I helped build so many, I was a part of the foundation of the modern interconnected world that we have today. Okay. In varying forms. That's all that I'm getting at. Not saying I'm any kind of big name or any way important in all that, just that I was there. All right. I guess at this point, I should also make clear that I'm an anarchist. The very fact that wars occur are one of the things that bolsters my stance as an anarchist, quite frankly. Now, all of that said, okay? So there we got political leanings out of the way. We have religious leanings out of the way. Like I said, I'm a Kabbalist, and I am surrounded by Talmud Torah all around me where I am recording right now. I know the score, okay? On a lot of the abstractness that surrounds this war. I don't know if there's a whole lot of point to talking about the intricacies, the quote-unquote facts, and I put that in quotes, of what's happening. Partly because a lot of this stuff, you just can't know. It's like, oh, did babies get beheaded or didn't they? Did this happen or didn't they? What? It's all a jumble. We don't know. It's very hard to verify a lot of this information. It's usually easier to prove that something isn't true, but then that creates the problem of what actually is true, and finding out the truth of what's going on over there is a genuine challenge. When I say over there, I mean, Israel and Gaza. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on that. What I want to speak to, and maybe in some ways what I'm really speaking to, are my people. And when I say my people, I mean fellow Jews. And there's a lot of people who consider themselves Kabbalists that aren't Jews, among other things. So I guess I'm speaking to a lot of mystics as well. So when I say my people, I guess that can be a very broad thing, but that's who I am speaking to. You're the ones who asked me the questions. I am responding. I'm not going to pull out all those questions because a lot of them were getting into, oh, what do you think about this event that occurred and this event that occurred? And it's like, okay, well, first off, I have to go through, and yes, every single person has to do this today. It is the nature of the internet, okay, where you have to go through and verify this information. Because a lot of people, they think that they know something. They think that they're some kind of like investigator, investigative journalist or something along those lines. They think there's some kind of wild documentarian or that they're informed. No, all you have is an internet connection. That does not equate to having a grasp on reality or having insider knowledge or having a good grasp on what's going on. You just have an internet connection. I'm not saying it's a bad thing necessarily. I'm just saying understand what you're doing and where this information is coming from, and have an understanding of the abstractness of the lack of reliability, that comes with this. So, like I said, I want to keep this pretty tight. And so I want to make the statements that I think that are important. Okay. The first statement to make is that Gaza, because this will probably color whether or not you want to listen to the rest of this, but in my opinion, Gaza is, and always has been, effectively, or has been since the founding of Israel, has effectively been an open-air prison. In a very real way, it's a concentration camp. Can you guess whose side I'm on? Actually, you're wrong. Because at the end of the day, I'm really not on either side. I only have one side. That's the side of life. And you can't be on the side of life and promote war. That said, can I understand why Hamas engaged in the actions that they did? I don't agree with them at all. But can I understand it? Yeah, I guess in a certain way, I can understand it. Can I understand Israel's response? I don't want to get into, again, a lot of he said, she said, and, internet bullshit and details. But I can say this. I think that Israel welcomes this. And I mean that. And when I say Israel, I mean the Israeli government. Even though, there's polls out there to say that 90% of polled Israeli citizens are in support of of Netanyahu's actions in this war. If that's true, that's terrible. Now, we need to get in some actual factoids, though. Okay? Here's the deal. Israel. Let's talk about Israel. Israel is not being Israeli today, as in you are from Israel, right? The state of Israel. Being Israeli today does not make you Jewish. It does not guarantee that you're a Jew. Meaning, if someone says they're Israeli, that doesn't inherently mean that they also happen to be genetically Jewish or ethnically Jewish. Much of the Israeli government, as well as the Israeli population, is Arab. Okay? For example, like myself, I'm Ashkenazi, okay? Ashkenazi Jew. Is a lot of the population or the Jewish population of Israel Ashkenazi? Yes, this is true. Now, genetically, DNA, haplotype, right? Genetically, Ashkenazis, who most people think Ashkenazi Jews are like, oh, well, they're white Jews. They look white, right? As compared to Sephardic or, Beta Israel or whatever. Okay. Ashkenazis are actually, like, DNA-wise, are related to Arabs, to Middle Eastern populations, not European populations. Okay, this is a huge misconception. Just like the huge misconception that somehow, that all of Israel all the state of Israel today is Jewish. Like it's just not true. Okay. If that 90% poll is accurate, there's a lot of Arabs voting or polled there as well. And it ain't just 10% that said, no, I don't agree with Netanyahu. Okay? This is really key to get, because this is the start of where people start to think that, oh, this is a race war. They want to wipe out the Jews. No. I mean, are there groups, and in fact, groups within Hamas, perhaps, that may feel that way? Sure, maybe there are. Okay. But my point is that attacking Israel is not just attacking Jews, it's also attacking Arabs. Conversely, Israel, the Israeli government, the IDF, okay, the Israeli Defense Force, attacking Hamas is not Jews wiping out Palestinians. Okay, again, just Israeli doesn't equate automatically to Jewish. It can be Arab as well. Okay, service in the IDF is compulsory for 2 years for every single Israeli citizen, whether it's Jew or Arab. Got that? These are the nuances that you don't get, because you look at all you see when you see the state of Israel is you see the Star of David, right? Magin David. And you think that it instantly means, oh, it's all Jews there, when that's just not true. And not to get lost in the side subject, but the Star of David isn't even a fucking Jewish symbol. Okay. I wear a menorah around my neck every single day. I have worn the Star of David in the past, but as you study more, as you learn more, right? As you dig deeper into your own roots and history of my people, that being in this case, the Jews, you find out very quickly, oh, actually the Star of David, that's something that was pushed on us by the Gentiles. Like, that's not our symbol at all. Very key. Okay. So again, this is more where nuance is missing. I don't want to get lost on that fact. Let's keep going. So it should be clear that this is not Jews versus Arabs. There is a lot more at stake here, a lot more at play. I could give you my own theories. To some degree, they don't matter, right? Because this is happening regardless of why I say the reasons are. But it's important, at the very least, it's important to know that it's not happening for the reasons that social media and honestly, a lot of church leaders think asshats like John Hagee and others would want you to believe that this has happened or that this is happening. It's very hard for me to prove, okay, no, this is why this is happening. It's very hard for anyone to say this is why this is happening. But can you quickly debunk the reasons that it's not happening? Yeah, I think you can do that, because there's some hard data around all of that. Now, I made the statement earlier that the Israeli government is probably, wanted this to happen even. I know some people get even conspiratorial to the point that they want to make the claim that Israel was behind this even happening, the Israeli government. And I want to be particular in Israeli government and not the citizenry, ultimately two different things. Okay. And, the conspiracy theory basically goes, and it's not, I don't even like to use the word conspiracy theory. It's a theory. Okay. The theory goes, because I've heard respected political scientists, which that's like saying you're an expert in poop, but okay. but political scientists and people that I actually have respect for, like Norman Finkelstein and others, have made the claim that Israel is taking advantage of this situation, because they needed, after what happened with Hezbollah years ago, was it 2014? After what happened with Hezbollah years ago, Israel effectively lost that outside of a month. And since then, the concern would be in the Israeli government that that Israel is seen as soft and weak in the Middle East. And so they need to toughen up their image again. Now you could say, wow, that's crazy. That's ridiculous. However, I'm just going to bolster this with anecdote, to be sure, but I'm going to bolster this with when I was in the Army, I actually had sergeants who told me that, and these were people who had served also, or rather had served with people who served in Vietnam. So you could say it's kind of secondhand if you want to, but I'm just putting this out there. But this is long before. I mean, we're talking the early aughts when I was in the Army, and the statement was that the reason the U.S. was so hot to trot during not Operation Iraqi Freedom, but actually during Operation Desert Shield, which would later become Desert Storm, which most people remember from the 90s, right? When Iraq was invading Kuwait, okay? That the reason America jumped on that so quickly was America wanted to show the world that it doesn't fight wars like it did during Vietnam, which it didn't win. Okay, now again, there's always more than one reason, but is that part of it? Sure. So could that at the very least be part of what's going on in why the Israeli government is not interested in ceasefires and all this other stuff right now? Yeah, probably. It's probably part of it. I wouldn't dare say it's the only reason, but part of it, sure. And, is it good PR on their side? And I say that in a twisted sense. Well, me as a PR representative, that I also, that's a part of my living, part of my day job. Yep. Sends out a pretty powerful message to your quote unquote enemies. Sure. Okay. But this idea, is not something that's solely the Israeli government. Arguably, the U.S. government had the same thing in mind many, many decades ago. Now, I want to take this moment to discuss the Israeli government and the state of Israel in general. In the abstract. Longtime listeners have already heard me say these sorts of things in the past, long before any of these wars ever happened, or, this war in particular ever happened. But I do not believe that the state of Israel should exist. And another news flash for you, most Jews around the world don't agree, especially like your really, really ardent Jews. Most of the Jews you see walking around, with their with our funny hats on, right? I don't wear those, but with the funny hats on, okay, the funny hair, the black suits, all that jazz. Most of them are what we call Hasidic, right? They're Hasidim. Hasidic Jews, which make up, what are visually the most recognized. And I don't know the exact numbers to say that they're the most prominent. Probably not. Jews only make up, 0.01% of the world's population. But they are a substantial and arguably fairly powerful, aspect of Jewry, if I'm to say that, use that term. Because, Judaism's always kind of tough. Like Jewishness, like, are you talking about the religion? Are you talking about the ethnicity? Are you talking about both? Because one doesn't always equate the other. But for Hasidim, it certainly does. And they, in general, do not agree with the existence of the state of Israel and never have. And this comes out of what is called the Three Oaths. It is a part of the Talmud. It is, however, an extrapolation from the most, what is generally considered, outside of Torah, or, within the Tanakh, the most important book in the Bible, that being the Song of Solomon or the Song of Songs. It is extrapolated from that. It's important for me to bring that up because when something is a product, when an idea, when these, this concept, this midrash concept within Talmud, okay, when this is pulled out of the Song of Solomon, in ways it's holier than other ideas that you would pull out of the Tanakh. So that's important. Okay. Now I could get into a big conversation around the importance of the Song of Solomon, but I've talked about that in the past. I don't want to recover that ground here. But only just know that, someone who's often considered the greatest rabbi of all time, that being Rabbi Akiva, made it abundantly clear that the Song of Songs is that all that you would say all of Tanakh is holy, but the Song of Songs is the most holy. Okay, so that's the kind of reverence that we're talking about here when you extrapolate a concept like the three O's out of such a book. Okay, so this should have more weight, and the three O's is something that there have been commentary on going back and forth for centuries, for thousands of years, or over 1,000 anyway. Okay, so the three O's. The three O's, very simply, are that Israel should not return to the land in droves, meaning that it shouldn't be a mass migration into Israel. Okay, that the Jews should not, mass migrate there. They shouldn't do, and nor should they do so by force, which that would be kind of that's sort of a byproduct of the idea of them moving in as a mass migration. Also, Israel. So that's the first oath. The second oath is Israel should not rebel against other nations. We'll talk about that. That's the second oath. Okay. And then the third oath. So the first two are oaths between God and the Jews. The third oath is between God and the rest of the world, because the third oath is that the nations shouldn't treat Israel too harshly. Now, when we hear that third oath, what's the first thing we think of? The Holocaust, right? Like, wow, if the nations aren't supposed to treat Israel too harshly, fuck that one up, Germany, right? Or Nazis, I should say, because I'm not going to blame the German people as a whole and for eternity for that. And the Holocaust did happen. Let's be clear. So how does this square away today? Okay. Now, you have to understand that in the 20th century, there have been a lot of changes that have occurred within Judaism. A lot of new denominations, you'd call them in Christianity. We'll call them denominations or schools within Judaism today have come out of it. Conservative Judaism, Reform Judaism, Reconstruction, all that. Okay. Like, of course, Orthodox, modern Orthodox, the Hasidim have been around for hundreds of years, but you get my point. Okay. I say this just to bring up that, okay, some might want to argue, well, who cares what Nachmanides or Maimonides said hundreds of years ago, about the three O's? What about today? What about right now? And I want to be, I want to empathize with that. I want to be sympathetic to that position. Okay. Well, let's talk about right now. Let's talk about the past 100 years, or a little bit more than even that. And the reality is that most practicing Jews, did not agree with Zionism, the concept of Zionism, which is the idea that the Jews are to return to to have their own country. And that's important too, because Zionism did not originally equate in the 19th century, and early 20th, did not originally equate to going back to Israel. The Jews just wanted some land anywhere. The Zionists anyway. They wanted some land anywhere. If it was Madagascar, if it was Arizona, wherever, they just wanted somewhere. And believe it or not, when Zionists were talking about going to pretty much anywhere other than Israel, there was fairly widespread support at the time for those ideas. Okay. It's more particular when the conversation gets into, oh, no, it has to be Israel. When Zionism evolves, and it took decades, but when it evolved in the early part of the 20th century, when it evolved to, no, Zionism means we go to Israel. Again, that wasn't originally what Zionism was. When it evolved into that, that's when suddenly you get, especially a lot of the Hasidic movements and so on, saying, no, you guys are wrong. We're not going to support Zionism. So not uninterestingly, the start of what would be called anti-Zionism, which is not the same thing as anti-Semitism, here's your nuance, Okay. The start of anti-Zionism was amazingly, I mean, and the evidence is there in history to look at. It was Arabs and Jews working together because neither of them wanted the Zionists to end up in Israel. Jews and Arabs working together. Can you believe that? Why? Because they fucking agreed on this. For Jews, the common interpretation that comes out of the three O's is that the Messiah is, when the Messiah comes, right? The Messianic age. When the Messiah comes, the Messiah is the only one that can set up a government in Israel. The Messiah is the only one that can create a new, quote unquote, nation of Israel. That was the running belief at the time. And the Messiah isn't here, so we're not going to Israel. Now, it would go so far, I mean, when you get into certain groups, especially within, when you think like the Satmar, right? And of course the Satmar Rebbe, someone who would be commonly called throughout the 20th century, be called the king of the rabbis, that being Rabbi Teitelbaum. And Rabbi Teitelbaum would actually go so far as to say that the reason, because we're bringing this full circle back to, okay, we have the three O's, but then how do you explain the Holocaust within the three O's, right? Because clearly the nations were being very harsh to the Jews. And also the second oath says that Israel can't fight against the nations, but then if you're being faced with genocide, what do you do? Okay. Well, interestingly, Rabbi Teitelbaum and others would actually make the claim that the Holocaust occurred because of Zionism itself. And that because there was such a strong movement for Jews to return to Israel before its set time, that's what brought on why, because basically, Rabbi Teitelbaum's argument would be that since the Jews broke their oaths by wanting to move to Israel en masse, and to do so would probably, it could be argued that the Samar Rebbe would know that, okay, this is going to require some wars, say like what would eventually be the 6 Day Wars among others, or 6 Days War. That he would know that there would be wars against the nations that would go on and that the Jews would be breaking their oaths. And so the idea is that God would know that the oaths would get broken and were being planned to get broken and they would get broken. And so oath number 3 gets let loose, right? And thus you have the Holocaust. Now, I'm not going to say I agree with the Samar Rebbe on this, all right? But I am just trying to illustrate to you that the actions of the Israeli government, of the modern state of Israel, do not equate nor reflect to the bulk of Jews, nor within the precepts of Judaism itself. It's not. They're not the same fucking thing. Okay? However, where I do agree with the Samar Rebbe is that the state of Israel existing is against the precepts of Torah, of Talmud Torah. It should not exist. Now, the Zionists will make a counter argument saying that, well, yeah, of course the Hasidics, the Hasidim believe this. Of course they think this way. Why? Because the Hasidim have, even say, the Samar Rebbe, and his descendants, they have power because power is, power within Judaism, authority within Judaism is no longer centralized in Jerusalem. And why would they want to give up their authority? Their quote unquote privileged position, if that's the case. Here's where I will disagree, because outside of, I'm not a Hasidic. I don't consider myself Hasidic whatsoever. I have tremendous respect, and many other Jews who also don't consider themselves Hasidic do as well, have tremendous respect for the Hasidim carrying on and preserving Kabbalah, preserving the Zohar, preserving those commentaries, preserving the magic and the mysticism of Judaism. And they did that almost singularly, because when you come out of the Enlightenment, Judaism, Jews, rabbis in general, tried to bring more quote unquote rationality, right? The bastion of the Enlightenment. They wanted to bring in more rationality. And they were denying the mysticism and the magic that is absolutely a part of Torah, that is absolutely a part of Judaism. So I am personally, as a Kabbalist, I am forever grateful that the Hasidim carried on this knowledge and this tradition that is, I would argue, the true heart. And I'm not the only one to argue this, but is the true heart of Judaism. Now, today, a lot of Jews, practicing Jews, have, there's a renewed interest in the Zohar, in Kabbalah. And I'm really grateful that that's a thing. But even when I was younger, that was still almost taboo to talk about, whether it was at Temple Bethel or, anywhere I was going in New York. Now, I bring this up to suggest to you that, and we know whether it's other, Hasidic leaders, great rabbis, the Baal Shem Tov and others, we know there are a lot, and believe me, there's plenty of areas. Let me make this really clear up front. There's plenty of areas. I only mentioned one, but there are plenty of areas where I disagree with the Samar Reb, where I disagree with Rabbi Teitelbaum. But, and this is true for just about any rabbi. In fact, the very heart of rabbinicism, it seems, is to disagree with each other. But, or that's a core aspect of being rabbis, I guess. But regardless, the Baal Shem Tov, we know, is one example, and there are plenty of other examples where, Hasidim actually felt at points that they had to kind of hide what they were trying to say. Okay, they had to cloak it. And I think some of the, one of my conclusions, as someone who has studied heavily the book of Zohar, the book of Bahir, and Sefer Yetzirah, plenty of other Kabbalistic works, it's pretty clear, when you get into Kabbalah, which, like I said, really Kabbalah, and as I've said many times on my show, Kabbalah is really just Judaism. Judaism is Kabbalah. Okay, that's the original. That's the autograph. All right. Kabbalah really espouses a decentralized, shall we say, a decentralized Judaism, even though Kabbalah respects all life. Okay. It's really about being, Kabbalah is effectively saying that, no, Jerusalem doesn't matter. Israel doesn't matter. I know you're going to look back and you're going to read where in the Zohar it actually says this and it says this, and Israel really matters. No, just as a quick example in the Zohar, when you read where the Zohar is saying, nasty things about witches and pagans and all this other stuff, really, anytime you see those words in the Zohar, again, it's more of that cloaked language, and this is even before the Hasidim, but this is really cloaked language where the Kabbalists, the original Kabbalists, were saying they were talking about Christians, right? Like that's what they mean by that. Just, they can't say it outright. Why? Because they're surrounded by Christians. And same thing, when the Hasidim is growing, okay, when the Hasidic movement is growing, you can't push too hard against the traditional rabbis, at least at first. You can't go too crazy, even though really Kabbalah is saying this, and thus, really the Talmud and Torah and everything is saying this, and this, some of which might seem anathema, say, to your everyday rabbi. We'll cloak it in certain language, but those, to get a little biblical, all right, those who have ears to hear will hear it, will know what's actually being said in these instances. And I think the Hasidim, part of the reason they had no problem and were readily anti-Zionist is because ultimately they knew, actually, no, going back to Israel doesn't really matter. Because they were practicing Kabbalists, they recognized that their faith, their rituals, their practice of mitzvot was playing on a galactic, nay, a universal scale. So large, the biggest scale you can think of. And hell, it's even supra-universal, what they were doing. Practicing Kabbalah is so important. Kabbalah is playing on such a grand scale, fixing the shards of a broken universe, not a country, not a planet, the universe, that for them to pretend to be real estate agents and give a rat's ass about some little plot of land in the Middle East. You want to talk about a lack of logic? There's no logic there. There's no reason. There's nothing. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Are you trying to repair the universe or not? And that's what Tikkun Olam is all about, folks. Also note, within Kabbalah, there is no mention of, and now you must go to war, and now you must go and kill this person, and now you must go and do that. That never comes up. I mean, it's no wonder that after the Enlightenment, that Jews or rabbis were, eschewing the Zohar, were eschewing, Kabbalah and mysticism. Why? Because they were wanting to fit in. They were wanting to, we like this new material civilization. We like this new, this imperialism. We dig this. But what powers all of that? Ultimately, it's war. But if they took their religion, their spirituality, rather, to its logical conclusion, to its end game, there's no war. And for me, it's part of what makes this so sad. Is, I'm not the only Kabbalist who knows this. I'm not. I know I'm not. I'm not the only Jew that knows this. I know I'm not. But I and they get conflated with this notion of world Jewry, or that somehow we're all a part of the state of Israel. An attack on the state of Israel is an attack on all Jews and all this. When we know, man, the state of Israel doesn't matter. It shouldn't even exist. Even if we played under the rules of rabbinicism, it shouldn't exist. Get out of there. How do you solve this conflict? Get the fuck out. I see so many other Jews, saying, "Oh, no one's standing with us. We're threatened. We're getting killed. We're getting this and that." Baby, don't you see? I've brought the. I said I'd try not to get emotional. Look around you. Look around you. Okay? Any of my fellow Jews who are, and hell, non-Jews, I don't care. Look around you. Any of you that are students of history. Do you see any Amalekites around you? Are there any Philistines? Any Romans? Any Spartans? I don't know. Pick your group. All these groups that we know did exist in history. Look around. Do you see any of them? No, they're nowhere to be seen. Part of the reason you knew that those people walked the earth at one point, though, is because of us. Because the Jews wrote shit down. But we didn't just write shit down. We're still here. We didn't lose shit. We won. We've already won. When all of these other populations, all these other empires, all these other peoples have come and gone, we're still here. What are you talking about? That the world's that we're gonna get offed? That such and such is gonna happen? Such terrible thing? Everybody wants us dead and blah, blah, blah. Man, I've been hearing that shit since I was a kid. There may be people out there that want that. Okay? But they are so in the minority. Just like most forms of hatred are so in the minority. guys, gals, Z's, fellow Jews, we've already won. There's nothing that's ours to lose. Israel isn't even, we don't need it. We've never needed it. We're still here because we didn't have a country, because we didn't identify ourselves with a specific geography, because we adapted anywhere we went. That's our power. That's our strength, is that we can exist anywhere and still be us. It was a fucking trap that Britain put us in by saying, oh yeah, oh, here's Israel. Should have said, no, fuck you. We're just fine wherever we are. It's madness. Anytime. I mean, it doesn't mean to say when others, I mean, and it's Jew or Arab or anyone is killed, it's a tragedy, okay? But anytime that language comes around and I hear people, and believe me, you know, in like libertarian movement that I've hung out, I know there's the cats who, oh, fuck, there's the guys, or really the wimps, you know, that have come out with that, oh yeah, all the Jews, all the world bankers, all this crap, you know, and they're all laying all this out, and Jews won't replace us, and blah, 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 and, you know, they're going to do something about it, and every time I just want to fart in their face. Hell, I'd do it to Hitler, too, and say, oh, you think you're going to wipe out the Jews? What the fuck makes you think you can when no one else ever could? What do you got, jackass? Nothing. Nothing but hate on your side. And that, in the end, doesn't win anything. I just don't get it. I don't get it. The best thing that ever happened. Controversial statement, you got it. Happy. Come and get me. Okay? Controversial statement? Sure. The best thing that ever happened to my people is when the Second Temple was torn down. Because then the temple was everywhere. I'm not just making that shit up. Okay? That's a core tenet of Talmud Torah. It's a core tenet of Kabbalah in any case, which is ultimately a commentary on Talmud Torah. Now, for me, as a Kabbalist, I'll be open. I don't believe in a Sky Daddy God whatsoever. Okay, there is an Ein Sof. Now, let's just say, for the sake of the argument, let's just say that the Ein Sof did somehow preserve a special people like the Jews. You know, to keep them so that the knowledge of universe of the Ein Sof could be preserved, that being Kabbalah. Let's say that was the reason, but for whatever, in fact, the reasons don't matter, just that a special people was preserved. Let me assure you of this. We were not preserved to launch missiles at people, to kill children, to play as petty real estate agents. We weren't preserved on this planet to wipe out entire populations. We're here to spread the truth. If a truth has to be spread by the butt of the gun, or the sword, or the missile, it's not the truth. So I don't know what kind of shit they're peddling in the halls of government in Israel, but it's not the truth. That goes true for any violent organization, regardless of side, regardless of nationality, race, creed. The truth needs no weapons. It's its own weapon. And I think that's ultimately what I wanted to get out and what I wanted to make sure was known. Is that violence, war is not going to solve these problems. And there are genuine problems in the world. I'm not pretending that there isn't. Okay. War doesn't solve it. And it's not some, hippy-dippy concept like, all we need is love or anything. No. People need to be called out. Changes need to occur. But they are drastic changes. Now, those kinds of changes don't happen overnight. And where they should start, because it'll always start small, where they should start are with people who know better. And if my people studied their own history, studied their own books, and the truths and knowledge and power that exists beyond the knowledge of those books, that they have easy access to. And everyone can do this. I'm not saying that we're some special people. If you don't do that, it's never going to get... This peaceful evolution is never going to... It's never going to happen. It has to start small. It has to start with people who have it. And you have it. Leave Israel behind? Yep. Go ahead. Get out of there. It's okay. Just tell, it's been a decades-long fuck-up. But just admit it. Move on. There's a whole world out there. And it's beautiful. And it's wonderful. And we can make it more wonderful. Kabbalah started to get popularly espoused because the Jews were meeting a time of genuine oppression in Spain. That's when it became available to more of the public, and it wasn't just an elitist thing. That time has returned. If you think that Hamas is going after the Jews, then that time has returned. I'm saying if you think that. I think there's a lot more at play. But regardless, if that's what you think, then the same thing that got us out of the Holocaust in Spain so many centuries ago, then it's time to go back to it. It's time for it to rise again. No violence required. Oh, but I've built this incredible life. I've done this. I've done that. Accept your heritage. Didn't you hear me earlier? This isn't about Israel. This isn't about Jerusalem. This isn't anything about that. We are playing on a galactic scale. Who cares? And if someone does happen to care about some little plot of land, then let them fucking have it until they grow up. Maybe that's a bit derogatory, but let them have it until they reach an understanding that you can espouse by living, by being the light unto the nations and showing them the grander knowledge, the grander love, the grander peace that can be had. You're never going to change somebody's mind with a gun. You're never going to change somebody's mind. Not really. You might strike fear or something like that, but that's not changing someone's mind. That's not evolving. War is not a tactic that works. I say this as someone who fought in two. They didn't work then. So many of the problems, hell, the Afghan war, that wasn't one. So many problems still exist that supposedly intervention from the most powerful military in the world was supposed to solve. It didn't solve anything. There's no reason to believe for a second that this will. This isn't a matter of never again. This is a matter of a people saying, we were wrong. So, is Dr. Sovereign an anti-Zionist? You bet. Is Dr. Sovereign anti-Semitic? No. Like I said, those are not the same thing. I am quite the opposite. You're not going to get from me, oh, we have to defend Israel. Oh, we have to do this. I didn't even get into the Christian arguments, which are all just pure nonsense. Pure nonsense. That, frankly, comes out of Crusader ideology, which is a whole other level of fucked up. Again, I'll end with this message to my fellow Jews. We're not going to lose anything. We've already won. We've won the entire stage of history. We're still here. I'll see all of you, on the other side.